Buenos días. ¿Qué tal? Bienvenidos a Málaga. Good morning. Welcome to Malaga. My name is Luis. I will be your MC for the next couple of days.
Me llamo Luis y voy a ser el maestro de ceremonias de estos 2 días y espero veros también en el espacio que se llama el Corner. Debo decir que estamos encantados de haber reunido a toda esta gente donde hay un gran equilibrio entre gobernanza, negocios y academia. Y va a ser realmente una convergencia política, tecnológica y académica aquí. Aquí estamos convergiendo también y tengo aquí a mi compañera Claire. Muchas gracias, Luis.
There was an awful lot of hype about blockchain. It had a world of possibilities. 2 years on, where are we? Well, what it seems to me is that those possibilities have now been distilled down into some real practical applications. And over the next 2 days, we're going to look at those practical applications and how can they realize their full potential. Pascal.
Yes, as we said, we're very excited to be here as we are going to witness a true explosion of creativity, I believe. An explosion that will hopefully spark a lot of conversations amongst each other, but also will spark transformation going forward. We're very excited to see the program put together by the European Commission, by the INATBA, by Alastria, and by the EU Blockchain Observatory. And like I said, I think that if we, take the time with each other to interact and engage, I think we get that truly convergence. Back to you, Claire.
And it's going to be convergence on time. So you've already seen I'm the bad cop. That's because I have British and Swiss nationalities and I'm ex-BBC. It's an extremely ambitious agenda. Please don't shoot the messengers, but we are going to try and keep this on time. We're going to use Slido. Now, all of you are absolute seasoned conference goers, so we're going to go on slido.com and you will see that you can put in the word convergence. And at that point, it's whether you're in the corner, auditorium 1, auditorium 2, and you can vote. You can vote for the best question or you can write your own question because you will see that on some of the panels we will appear suddenly, miraculously, and there will be the most voted question on the screen. And we're going to put this to the moderator who's going to put it to the most relevant speaker. So the moderators, it's all about time management. Speakers, it's all about time management. And audience, we're doing this for you. So please do tweet Convergence 19. Without further ado, Luis is now going to talk to some of our Spanish hosts.
Thank
Luis.
you. All right, so let's get started. This is the interview number 1, our first event. This is called Convergence in Malaga, the Global Blockchain Congress launching in Spain. I call on stage, please, Maria Parga, President of the Board of Alastria, Susana Carillo, Vice Mayor of the City of Malaga, Enrique Alonso, Spanish State Council, and Rogelio Velasco, Minister of Economy, Knowledge, Business and University at the Junta de Andalusia. No, ese es mío. Well, thank you for being with us today. Let's start by Maria. Let me do it in Spanish and English since they are short questions. Maria, ¿qué significa este congreso para Alastria? What does this blockchain congress mean for Alastria?
Okay, thank you. Bienvenidos. Thank you and welcome to the beautiful city of Malaga, Spain. Thank you all for helping us gather the whole blockchain ecosystem. Policymakers, regulators, industry influencers, developers, researchers and entrepreneurs coming from all around the world to enjoy a couple of days of intense discussion about blockchain. Well, consensus is in the very base of blockchain technology. It's its true essence. And we will only be able to move forward within consensus and collaboration by all parties. Different industry entities of all sizes, from small, medium to big companies, from technology to business school, from university to scientific parks, from policymaker to government, both local, regional, national, or supranational. This same consensus is in the origin of Alastria, a consensus that is still kept and that we promote every single day to be the hallmark of our work. To achieve this consensus, we have to overcome numerous difficulties, very, very many. Among other reasons, because of the different visions and legitimate interests of the more than 500 members who today are part of Alastria. We are very diverse, but we all agree on the relevance of the impact that this technology is already having in the present and will have in the future. That's why Alastria means unity and adds, grows, builds, collaborates, creates community, and promotes active listening between organization and people, with the aim to make the quest for the common good a reality, respecting diversity, to innovate and improving global well-being. And that's why Alastria is focused and will continue to be focused on this technology, on its application to real cases, helping Spain to become today's a proof of concept playground. Apart from being a founding member of INATBA, Alastria is also a founding member of LACChain, the Latin American and the Caribbean blockchain network inspired by Alastria. Last week, we participated with them in Forumic Reinventing Inclusion, a forum held in Dominican Republic under the organization of IDV Lab. We addressed solutions to inclusion problems, the kind of solution that citizens are currently demanding with demonstration in the street. The world is in a crucial moment to define the parameters which will determine the following years. We are aware that there is still a long way to go, and that we have to keep being present and adding collaborative knowledge to take blockchain to the next level, to drive sustainable economic level and political models, to allow us as citizens of the world to reach the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. This is why we are all in Convergence. In that sense, the issues on standardization and regulation to be discussed during this Congress will be paramount to consolidate the use of blockchain. We will also share experience, lessons learned in different areas, which will allow us to add value to the growth of distributed ledger technology and its application. Finally, we will be more than pleased to promote the use of this technology and its integration with other enabled ones to ensure the evolution on the digital economy for everyone's benefit. Welcome and enjoy. Let's reshape the future.
And now our following speaker will be Susana Carillo. She's the Vice Mayor of the city of Malaga. Ms. Carillo, considering the status, the positioning of Malaga in the south of Europe, we'd love to know the innovation policies that have enabled you to attain such status, and now that we're at it, how are you planning the future?
Buenos días, señores y señoras. First of all, I would like, in the name of our mayor, Francisco de la Torre, you met last night in the dinner, I would like to welcome you to the city and to thank you for attending to this event. I would like the organization, I would like to thank the organization, to the European Commission, to Junta de Andalucía, Alastria, Palacio de Ferias and the different sponsors to organize this fantastic project, this fantastic summit, because we think we are going to have a fantastic opportunity to share real projects, to share new technologies and to learn a lot during these days in Malaga. Well, if we speak about Malaga, as you know, Malaga is a good example about how a city can transform itself during last year using technology. For us, it has been really important to work in a team between the different administration, the different companies installed in Malaga, to work in a team with the citizens, of course, and with the different institutions. When you work in a same team, it's easier to achieve the objectives. It's very important to listen the citizens, the customers you have in your business. In our case, the customers are the citizens. It's very important to work near the legislators, because you need to ask them for the needs you have to to deploy new technologies as blockchain. And you need to understand what the companies need to improve their business. In our strategic plan in the city, we have a clear commitment. It's always to deploy technology, to use the innovation, to improve all the services we are providing in the city, to improve culture, to improve environment, and always we try to organize all the activities, not forgetting the important sustainable development goals established by the United Nations. No? For this objective, we always try to improve the quality of life of all of our citizens that lives here in Malaga, and of course to attract more investment, to attract talent to Malaga, and to help all the companies that want to install here their installations. When you ask me about the future, I think it's really important to dream with the city that you want for the future. It's really important that from the municipality, all of us dream with the city where we would like to live with our family, with our kids. It's like when you listen to the famous song from John Lennon, no? Imagine, no? We like to imagine, why not a city where we could generate energy using only renewable sources, where we could only consume energy from renewable sources. From this objective, we are installing more photovoltaic plants over all the important buildings in the city, over schools or office or different important buildings like this one. We have more than 39 buildings in the city generating photovoltaic energy, and in this moment, more than 50% of the energy that we consume in Malaga, in the municipality side, is generated from renewable sources. So it's very important for us to continue installing more. Another way, we like to imagine a city where we could go walking, cycling, or using the bus when you need to move in your life. And for this objective, we have a sustainable mobility plan, where we are working in the different areas in the city. We like imagine a city where all the citizens could receive in real time the information that they need in each moment. It means that we need to install more sensors in the city. We need to communicate all the services. In this moment, we are receiving more than 100 different, 850 different data from different sources, and we are collecting all of this information in the same platform to give in a future platform for the citizens in their telephones, for example. Our objective is to give them just the information that they need. If you need information about tickets in a museum, or if you need information about parkings, or about bicycles, or about energy, or about pollution, all the different data that is possible nowadays, collect from the different points in the city, or the different business, in our case, the different services. In the case of blockchain, it's really important to speak about an agreement that we signed yesterday. I don't see in this moment Jose Minguez, the person from Endesa that coordinated this project. I think he's going to explain with more details in a few minutes. And in this project, it's the first time that in Spain, a municipality is going to work near the retailer company to solve poverty problems, energy poverty problems. It's very interesting how we are going to use blockchain technology to send the information that the retailer company needs from the social area in the mayor, in the municipality, sorry, to avoid problems with the supply of the energy to this customer. So summarizing, our objective is to use the technology to optimize all the services we have to offer to our citizens to achieve the sustainable management for the cities in the future.
Wonderful, thank you. Now we'll hear from Enrique Alonso from the Spanish State Council. The question has to do with blockchain technology. Is it already being considered, used as a technological tool in the building of policies, crafting of policies, either at the local, state, or a global level?
Well, let me tell you, good morning everybody, by the way, before I do that. I think so, but I think that still the Spanish administration is dragging its feet after new processes, new technological processes. Usually, since we are under the rule of law, laws need to be changed, regulations need to be made. So it's a slow process. But looking at their own practice, even from the top to the bottom, since the Council of State sometimes is so high up that we don't know what's going on, really, in Malaga or in Andalusia, unless you get all the data directly from the regulators to get to know what's there. But looking at my experience, certainly it's clear that Spain has the technology. I say that because I tried, for example, to convince them last August? No, it was the previous August, 2018. For example, you might think that Spain, which is the second sort of country, it has different levels, mountainous regions. After Switzerland, we are the second one that has more mountains. You are here and you might see the sea, but you might see the mountains of Malaga just behind. A beautiful park, by the way. And one of the problems we have is with the distribution of watersheds. Actually, just to even locate where does the drop fall so that it goes to one side or the other, where to find the line of the divisive line, is so complicated that it may be a question of centimeters, especially where you have plains. So we set up a system just to see the difference in Andalusia, for example. If one watershed is within the autonomous region, it goes directly and is managed directly by the Junta de Andalusia. But if you have some watershed in which a single drop literally flows through or falls in a different autonomous region, that's the competence of the state under the Spanish Constitution. So inter-autonomous regions, watersheds are there. And it was so difficult, actually, that finally with satellite, high-definition satellite, we were able, with the Copernicus, to set up with a difference only of 10 centimeters. Where do the drops, the basis zone, go, one side or the other? And we did an exercise to see what would change, and approximately 300 municipalities would have to change their constituency and get the water from a different place, whether the Basque region, some of the internal state regions. So I thought, why don't we do that? Because of climate change, it's going to change, the level might go. Why don't we set up a system in which instead of having definite lines, that they are set up by now in the official journal in August, why don't we have some sort of blockchain system that the people, the locals who are there, even looking at it, might notify, see, and of course you have to have control on who is saying that the water flows to one side or the other to be able to have a perfect regulatory system. The technicians scared to death. I said, no, Enrique, please, don't do that. It will be a disaster, actually. Why so? Actually, don't we have already the high-definition satellite? So it is ready to do very, very important things, but still it's dragging the feet in terms of the management itself of the policy. We were able to do that, by the way. So now we have no problem, and the municipalities really get their water from the watershed from which the water comes. But that, from the technical point of view, what I mean is, I think besides that, by the way, I'm just now looking at the 17 laws that will change completely the electricity and gas provision, the energy market. Many people might know here, I know there are some electrical companies, and we are looking exactly to the algorithm set out by the independent authority to be able to set up the methodology and with the pricing of electricity, both in the big market, actually in the one that even has transfrontier allocation of energy with Portugal, France, and Morocco, because we have several lines there, and also at the local level, and even the pricing for the consumers. And when I've been looking at the very specific way in which the market setting the price of the very small companies and even of the consumers, how do they reach in the daily market the value which is set up with some sort of blockchain, although you can find it, I'm seeing that the technology seems to be absolutely prepared to do that even in real time. Actually, with only 3 seconds, you know, you technicians, that you talk about real-time data going through supercomputers and getting the response immediately, you have to wait at least 3 minutes, because there's no possibility of the supercomputers to work out that. But it's prepared to do it, and we trust the independent authority, Comisión de la Energía, to do that, and very possibly by December we'll have the new pricing system ready for the new regulation. So the technology is there, and the state is getting slowly more and more confident. But I think that the future really is at the lower level. Why? Because still you need to have more control of the territory itself to do it. I've heard of some experiences even here, which I didn't know that it existed. I learned that in Aragon, for example, one of the groups, they talked to me afterwards, and they are doing all the public procurement. There was an exercise yesterday, a challenge on public procurement to see how that it works, and it seems to be working well in Vizcaya with the agricultural policy, which is very, very important. The new agricultural policy that's been negotiated in Brussels will change completely the framework, the goals, etc. And you need real data from the rural women, from whatever. I said that rural women because I think that's one of the lessons that still needs to be learned. I worked for American farmers, female farmers, the invisible women, just to make sure that after working in their farms for years, they still can get some pension rights when they retire, which is impossible under EU law, by the way. I say that. You have to have only one person who's responsive of the farm. Usually what happens, well, the man, the woman is the man. So he has the one that pays everything, has the taxes, pays the taxes, and by the time of retirement, the woman, invisible women. The women in blue jeans who are working in farms have it very difficult in Sweden, in Germany, etc., to get, as former workers, their pension rights. I was working in all those systems, and in Vizcaya, for example, in the region, I've learned that they are doing that quite well. It's more difficult going in other regions, but the important thing is that, and I would say, please go to the population itself, to the people that really need to be able to produce data so that policies are reflected immediately through supercomputers, all the mechanisms, and we can test the data right away, very quickly, with real certainty, so to say. I mean, be sure that what we decide is based on real data and not simply opinions, you know, through political parties or whatever. That is the difficulty. So there are some good stories, by the way. For example, I think the last blockchain success that has been done is been done through a European infrastructure, the only research infrastructure. One is coming to Granada. I don't know whether you know it, in a few months, actually, but we have only one the location headquarters of one, ERIC, European Research Infrastructure Consortium, is based in Seville. They're sponsoring also this event. And they came out with something which is very important called LiveLog, which is all the biodiversity data capability worldwide, global. So it's a system that would allow somebody that happens to go through Malaga and say, oh my gosh, this horse that we saw yesterday is from a special breed that comes from a special horse. I'll take a picture and take a picture, and that will go into the data that goes to the Secretariat of the CBD in Montreal, and they'll be able to produce so that the essential biodiversity variables can be, and we have in time and space scales, millions of data, so that finally biodiversity loss as a global problem can be challenged, and we can set up reasonable policies, because concerning biodiversity, that's the main problem. Everything is under discussion. Not only what's the status of biodiversity, it's also what does affect biodiversity in a positive or negative way. Actually, it was done in Seville, very close, and also in Malaga, actually in LifeWatch, which is the only European infrastructure that is working on biodiversity data to be able to produce the global projection of future of what has been the trend, biodiversity loss of winning. Let me close very quickly, because I say it's very difficult also. We have had important failures. Don't silo technology. For those of you that might work on blockchains based on IPRs and on property patent rights or whatever of technology, don't do that, because it would be a disaster. We saw one exercise in the transplant of organs. There has been a big debate, because when it had to be changed, it was impossible, because the contract that had signed had already been captured by the private company that had already set up that it would be there for 10 years, but as soon as they get the contract, they don't innovate, they don't keep on investing on research, they simply get the return. There have been also some other problems also with the agricultural policy, also in Europe. I'm now working actually, and with that I'll finish. I'm not sure whether I'm here because of horses, blockchain, or because of the Council of State, but we are trying to track back how many wild or semi-wild horses are there in Europe, based on a derogation set up by the European Commission. Go to the webpage, click, and you don't even have the information there, the webpage of the Commission. Why? Because the European Union doesn't want to hear anything about wild horses. It wants cattle, livestock, for meat, very possibly. So that's a big problem also. And we are trying to do it, and the European Commission still needs a lot of blockchains, real participation of citizens to be able to actually address that. And one last question. I want the people who were talking about access immediately from refugees, women on the risk of exclusion, etc., that might get contracts right away if they get enough training so that the talent goes there. Literally, I want to talk to them, because I had a big discussion the other day with CEPU, with the Spanish Employment Service, because there was no way that 300 refugees that could be trained in 2 months for jobs of 2,000 euros under the law would be able literally to start working tomorrow, right, when we had the trainers, we had the people, we had the families totally dependent because of the bureaucracy. So please help us fighting bureaucracy from the top down, pretty much as citizens try to fight it from the bottom up. And I think that blockchain is a perfect tool. If there was one of the groups, I'll tell you now, please let me know, because I'll take you to the SEPE, to the Spanish public system, because the main problem that we have in Spain is unemployment, believe me.
Thank you very much.
So probably through blockchain you can help that a lot in the future of public policies, which I hope means tomorrow, Monday. We are Monday already, or Tuesday.
Thank you.
On Wednesday. And congratulations for all the work that you are doing.
And finally, we'll hear Rogelio Velasco. He's the Minister of Economy, Knowledge, Business and University of the Junta de Andalusia. And since it's Andalusia, let's talk about the region. What's the role that the blockchain technology is playing? What are the opportunities that it entails? And how is the government fostering, helping develop the technology here?
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for having invited me to participate in this event. Very important event, because we are talking about one of the technologies that are changing the world and is going to keep changing the world in the near future. Our main focus is about education, it's about human capital, it's about professional training. You know, last year in Europe, digital employment grew 6 times faster than total employment. Currently, over 25% as average of European companies are hiring, say, software engineers. Those numbers are impressive, but it is also true that 1 out of 2 companies find it very difficult to find the right professionals. There is a mismatch between what the companies and the public administration need and what the market is offering from a professional training point of view. There is a gap that we should urgently close if we want to keep pace with technological change. So what is the regional government of Andalusia doing right now regarding not just blockchain, but new technologies? First of all, we have a portfolio, a big portfolio of blockchain successful business cases in the international arena, and we are handed over those business cases, blockchain business cases, to the companies, trying for them to replicate those business models here in Andalusia and in Spain. Second, as you know, big corporations have set up in the last 10 to 15 years their own corporate universities, trying to provide the right training to their managers and employees. We have mimicked that methodology. We have set up our own corporate or Junta Andalusia regional government university, offering online training on blockchain as well as face-to-face training. As a matter of fact, this year we have organized 5 face-to-face blockchain courses, and they have been highly successful. Another question regarding the tools that the regional government is using regarding blockchain is that we are already prepared. We have started our work regarding the coming new European framework, starting the year 2021, lasting until 2027. We are going to be 100% aligned with that European framework, which is going to invest 9.2 billion euros in order to promote new technologies, of course, including blockchain. And last, the main reason why we are strongly encouraging blockchain technology, it is because we are fully conscious of the role that this technology is going to play going forward. And we cannot be out of that wagon. We have to work hard in order to match the best European regions and countries. Overall, all in all, we are supporting from the regional government this event, and we promise to do so again the coming years. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all the speakers in the name of the organization for accompanying us. It's been a real honor and a treat as well to have you here and to listen to you. I hope you stay with us for a few more hours and enjoy this first day of Convergence. Thank you very much. Now the program will go on, and my colleague Claire takes up the mic now.
Thank you, Luis, and also for our Spanish hosts.
And my colleagues, so great to be here and great to see you here. I mean, we don't have the money yet. We don't have the 9.10 billion euros yet, but I take it we can kind of trust that the Spanish government will support us. This is a decision that the heads of state and government will take probably later this year, but it'd be good if we get it. What is the European Commission doing to promote blockchain? I mean, maybe first to say that we think that blockchain has a lot of promise, a lot of potential for the European Union, for the economy and for the society, but we want technology to work for people. We think that it is important that technology helps us improve our lives, that it respects our values and our traditions in Europe. So it's not just blockchain as a technology. We want blockchain to be data privacy friendly, for example. We want it to be secure. We want it to be sustainable, environmentally sustainable. We also want it to be socially inclusive. We don't want to leave people behind in the European Union. We want it to be interoperable because we like competition in the European Union. So it's blockchain according to our own European values, which are not the same necessarily as values that you see in other parts of the world. Well, what is the European Commission, or what has it been doing concretely? Well, when we started about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we first said we need to have a map. If you chart out the course for the future, you need to know what's happening around you. So we established the European Blockchain Observatory and Forum, mapping all the activities around blockchain, not just in Europe, but around the world, so that we were well aware of what was going on. We could learn from what others had already done. We could see gaps in our own policy making. And we created a forum where the best people, the most cutting edge researchers could exchange views. And again, this would help us to learn. So that was the first thing we did, is just look around us, see what's happening, what is the promise of this technology, where it's being tested, what are the issues, the challenges that are raised. The second thing we did is to say, if Europe is going to lead in this area, and we want to lead, we need to work together with our member states. We need to exploit to the full the single market, the digital single market. If we work together, we have a market of 500 million citizens. We count in the world. If we work at cross purposes, if every member state does its own thing, we weaken ourselves, we fragment. So we established the European Blockchain Partnership 18 months ago, and we were very pleased to see that member states were enthusiastic about this. They brought their expertise, their commitment, their ideas to this process, and I think it's been a tremendous success. It's actually beyond our wildest dreams. I mean, we are already experimenting with use cases. We're talking about policy responses. So that's working. It's good. This is fortunately an area where typically the European Commission comes in when member states have already invented their own wheel. This is a case where there's not yet an own wheel. We can invent a European wheel, and if possible, a global wheel. The third thing we did, once we had our governments around the table, is say we need a forum to discuss with the private sector. And we need a forum to discuss with the private sector and other governments at an international level, because Europe is an important player, but we're not alone in this world. We want a seamless system around the world for blockchain. So about a year ago, we got together with some industries and say, well, do you have that same sentiment that we need a forum to exchange views, to see how the public and the private sector can cooperate to create the conditions in Europe and around the world for blockchain to take off? And we got positive resonance. And then the industry got together, we supported it, we acted a bit as an incubator, the European Commission, and now we are 1 year later, and there's INATBA, there's this big conference, the organization is strong, is growing. Very pleased to see also the strong interest from governments around the world. Over the last, yesterday, today, tomorrow, we have guests here, very high-level guests from Canada, from Brazil, from India, from Japan. So I think we're in a good place at the moment, but of course there's much further to do. But the European Commission is absolutely determined to lead on blockchain and make sure that together with the other technologies, because blockchain is not just, it's not a technology that stands on its own, it needs to be connected with data, with AI, with supercomputing, etc., that Europe has all the conditions in place to to be successful in the future.
Gerard, I was struck by something that the State Council representative, Enrique Alonso, said. He said, we can use blockchain to fight bureaucracy. So what would be your view on that? Obviously, there is a lot of bureaucracy in international organizations, also in public administration. How can it be used to fight that bureaucracy?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's bureaucracy everywhere, also in private companies. I don't think it's just a monopoly of public organizations. And we don't like bureaucracy, so we need to fight it. I mean, I think what the European Union is as public sector, what is the role of the public sector here? I mean, I think the role of the public sector is actually to be a trailblazer, to show that blockchain can actually work. If it can work in the public sector, it can work in the private sector. So one of the things we're doing with the European Blockchain Partnership, for example, is testing use cases. I mean, beginning of next year, just think about that. There will be the first cross-border public services transactions in the European Union using blockchain technologies. For example, the recognition of diplomas. So if you've studied in one member state and you need to prove that in another member state, there's a blockchain application that can help you demonstrate that. We're using it, talking about bureaucracy. I mean, there's a lot of paperwork, of course, in governments. I mean, we write reports, we need to kind of circulate them in, I mean, particularly in the European Union with 27, 28 member states. So blockchain can help to cut back on administrative cost. I mean, if you kind of do your reporting through the blockchain, that can cut costs by about 50%. It can cut a lot of paperwork, can cut a lot of bureaucracy. We're experimenting also in the European Union to use blockchain with the kind of the VAT authorities, the tax authorities in the member states and the customs authorities to use blockchain for VAT declarations. That can cut a lot of costs for small businesses and large businesses to get on with what they are supposed to do, which is to do business and not to waste time on filling in paperwork. So blockchain has a huge potential. So the one role of the public sector is to use blockchain, to be a trailblazer, to show it can work. We'll make some mistakes, but we'll probably do more. We will have more successes, I definitely hope so, than making mistakes. The second role of the government is, of course, to create the framework conditions that blockchain can be adopted in the economy and in the society. There's a number of things that governments need to do. First is to make sure that there's a competitive environment, that the market can work, because it's ultimately the market that needs to decide where blockchain can be most useful. It's not governments going to tell the market where to use blockchain, it's markets themselves. So we need to ensure that there's effective competition. We need to make sure, and I mean, I think Minister Velasco made that point very eloquently, that there's enough people with the right skills. We need to upskill our population, not just in blockchain, but in AI, in big data, and a range of technologies. That means changes to education and skills system. That's the role of the governments. We need to make sure that the rules are up to date. We have done a lot of analysis on blockchain. What could be impediments to the rollout of blockchain? Well, for example, there is smart contracts, which is a very typical example for blockchain. In the European Union, the immediate question you always ask yourself, if there's a smart contract that has been validated in France and there's a problem in Germany, can you enforce that smart contract in Germany? Is it legally valid? Those are the kind of things that we need to think about and probably need to adapt our legislations on. So we need to invest in startups. We need to support the startup environment. There's lots of potential. I mean, Europe has a very strong deep tech startup community. There's potential for growth, enormous growth, new employment, kind of new productivity growth. We need to invest in research and development. So there's lots of things that government can do. And we need to talk internationally. We need to work with our partners around the world to come up with solutions that work for everyone.
Gerard, I realise that we've got to keep to time, because if I don't keep to time, then I've set a really bad precedent for the day. So in a tweet, as one of the organisers, what do you hope will come out of the next 2 days? A nice, succinct answer, please.
Connect, I would say. talk to each other. I mean, there's industry here, there's regulators here, there's academics here. It's a fantastic opportunity. The whole ecosystem is here. Talk to each other, learn from each other, and build something together. I think that's what we need to do over the next few days.
Gerard, thank you very, very much for setting the tone of the next 2 days, where we will indeed connect, interact, and engage. Thank you very much. And I'd now like to give the floor to my co-MC, Pascal.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you, Gerard, for enlightening us today and talking about how important it is to set a roadmap. I hope you all have set your own goals for today as well. I would now like to invite Ms. Julie Maupin on stage and to come sit with me. Ms. Julie Maupin, pardon me. She is the chair of the board of directors, there we go, with in ATSBA, correct? And also the director of social impact with the IOTA Foundation. So please explain to us, if you want, why, what INATBA is doing and what INATBA is.
Yeah, so INATBA stands for the International Association of Trusted Blockchain Applications. And as Director de Graaf also alluded to in his remarks, there was a great need in this space for a forum in which innovators from the smallest startups to the largest corporates could come together and speak with policymakers, lawmakers, regulators who were looking at the space and wondering, what do we do with this new technology? I'll tell a couple of stories to show why it was necessary.
Yeah.
I got into the blockchain space in 2012 when blockchain was just Bitcoin. And after Bitcoin came many, many other projects that came along. Ethereum with smart contracts. Then there was a wave of sort of privacy-focused technologies, Zcash, Monero, others who were really focusing on how can you make transactions secure and private. And then you had a whole wave of others who came along and said, well, what about governance? Can we use blockchains to help people spontaneously organize, to govern themselves, make decisions about financial infrastructures? We saw things like the DAO, the Decentralized Autonomous Organization, and many other variations of that. And then, later on, more recently with technologies like the one that I'm involved with, bringing distributed ledger technologies together with the Internet of Things. How can we use these decentralized technologies to really to secure data and bring it together with IoT so that we can measure things in real time, make good decisions about how we want to direct resources, and can we use these for public good, like to tackle climate change, for example.
That's a good one.
So there's all this exciting stuff that you can do with the technology, but we also have seen a lot of epic failures in this space, really epic failures, and I think we have to be honest about that.
Could you just, for the sake of learning from our
Sure.
mistakes, right? Tell me what is an epic failure that you've seen that you would like to emphasize.
Sure. So early on, the most popular exchange where people would exchange Bitcoin for other types of currencies was called Mt. Gox, and it exploded in spectacular fashion due to a cybersecurity breach at the interface between the Bitcoin blockchain and the exchange. And a lot of people lost a lot of money, which just went up in smoke essentially, and there were no safeguards for requiring exchanges to be custodians or to be treated like custodians of people's money at that point in time. The DAO, which I mentioned, this Decentralized Autonomous Organization, was a great idea for allowing people to pool funds in order to collectively via blockchain technology vote on essentially startups that they wanted to invest in and hopefully get a return automatically from those startups. But it turned out there was a bug in the smart contract that collected all the funds from the investors. And somebody found that bug and hacked it and was able to, over the course of, I think, 8 hours or so, steal about $50 million worth of tokens that were invested. So, these kinds of things, and this is a situation where there was no organization behind it. That's the whole idea. There were no people, there was no board, there was no human being or corporation or anybody who was liable for anything.
Which was the essence, obviously, of the DAO,
which is the essence of it and the power of it. But at the same time, there were a lot of things that weren't really well thought through. What happens if? And our governments that we elect to represent us and to take care of public policy interests are there to answer the question, what happens if, often. And also, what happens if these people make their independent decisions over here and these people over here? We have to look at the aggregate impact of that on society and understand, somebody has to try and keep an overview and sort of steer the ship a little bit just to make sure that these spectacular failures aren't so catastrophic that we get things like the financial crisis of 2008, right? So, and we started to talk to, we got at the IOTA Foundation and all the other major technologies in the space, many innovators came and built on various different types of technologies after Bitcoin. And you started to be able to see how you can use it for supply chain tracking. You can use it for fighting climate change. You can use it for helping finance startups in creative new ways that we didn't have before. You can do all kinds of exciting things with the technology, and they all bring policy and regulatory and legal issues with them.
So you have, for example, I've read a little bit about you. You've traveled the world. You've been a so-called sojourner. So when you say, I've seen, what is your personal favorite in this space, in the blockchain space? What is going on? What is your favorite project or
personal favorite?
Yeah, I think it's important for us to understand a little bit as to what drives you, right? Why are we here? What drives you?
Well, what got me into the space initially, back when I was an academic, when I came across Bitcoin, was the power of the technology to potentially stimulate financial inclusion in the developing world, and so I did that out of that reason. But as I journeyed through and saw the growth of the technology and really understood the need to speak directly to regulators and policymakers. That was why, when the European Commission called and said, hey, we have this crazy idea, we're thinking of starting this association, what do you think? I was immediately on board and said, yeah, that's a fantastic idea, I'd love to help bring that to reality. I remember talking to a member of the European Parliament who was heavily involved in drafting the GDPR, everyone's favorite piece of European legislation, and in the blockchain space. And he said to me, Julie, why were you not there? I held open door office hours every single month in my offices in Brussels for the 7 years, that it took to conceptualize and draft and finalize the GDPR, and you all never showed up. You all meaning all the blockchain and distributed ledger innovators. He said, I can tell you Microsoft was there every month, and Google was there, and all of the big technology companies. And I said, well, of course they were there. They're massive corporations with full-time lobbyists in Brussels. And this stuff is being innovated by people sitting around at home in hoodies. They're not sitting in Brussels, but they're doing extremely important work. And the question is, why were you not getting out and talking to all the people who were on the bleeding edge of innovation to understand how is GDPR going to affect innovation? And so, the European Union has been very deliberate about saying we don't want to make this mistake again. We want to put together a forum where people can sit together and talk about these issues, not only within Europe, as Gerard said, but also internationally. Because if the European Commission adopts one approach to money laundering regulations and AML, KYC on the blockchain, and the United States does it differently, and Japan does it differently, then we have a big problem in the space as innovators, because we simply cannot satisfy all of their prerogatives and still innovate. So it's in everyone's interest to come together to see what are the common points, what are our common concerns as governments, which ones can we address in a harmonized way that makes it easy for the innovation to flourish rather than extremely laborious to satisfy everyone's checkboxes. And that's why it's so exciting to be here and to see all of the government representatives who have come together from around the world, as well as startups, small, medium, and large enterprises and nonprofit foundations like ours. We're very, very excited. And I think it's a sign of the maturation of the blockchain space that we're all sitting together, rather than, sort of sniping at one another from across battle lines.
I think you have certainly stepped up to the plate with organizing these events. As I look at a program of over 80 panels, fireside chats, and keynotes, it's an amazing and a very ambitious program. But what I'm wondering also is, obviously we're sparking the discussion here, right? So what are you going to do for people to actually continue that conversation? It's one thing to spark, a fire. It's another thing to keep the fire burning. And as you said, there's so many representatives here of many different industries, of governments and regulators. But what are you doing to take this back home? What are some of the next steps that we can all take into account?
Yeah, so we are very heavily inviting and recruiting all of you to get involved with the work of INATBA. For government officials, we had an info session yesterday. If you missed it, please stop by the INATBA booth in the exhibition hall. We'd be very happy to help you understand how you can become involved and let us know what are your areas of priority where you need help figuring out, I don't know, privacy or cybersecurity, or how do you do real estate transactions on a blockchain, whatever your issue is, depending on your department. And then, also from the perspective of the rest of the industry, the innovators from large to small, we really need to come together and talk together. So I very much encourage you to join us, look into becoming an INATBA member. You can join working groups that are of interest to you. We have groups in mobility, in energy, in education, healthcare, real estate, financial services, obviously, is a very big one, and many others. We have 13 groups already launched, and we're very eager to have others join us who have a passion for a space that we're not yet covering. And help lead this charge, help sit down together with colleagues from around the world in both the public and private sector and figure this out together. So that's an open invitation to please join us. You can speak to me or any of the folks from INATBA who are here, or stop by the booth and get some more information. But really, we need to take it home, and in between conferences are wonderful and nice, but they're a great time to see each other, but we need to do the work at home in between.
Yeah, I think that's a very, so again, there's a warm welcome to meet the INATBA at your booth, obviously, and again, and take it to the next level. And I think it's very important to keep the conversation going. And as time permits, I want to get to another conversation. So Claire, I want to invite you to the podium, and thank you so much, Julie. It's been very enlightening.
Thanks, Pascal.
Yeah.
So as Pascal and Julie were saying, we want definite outcomes after these 2 days, so it's not just a talking shop. But what we're going to do now is actually project forward 5 years. Where are these distributed ledger technologies going to be? Well, I'm going to introduce a man who really must have had a crystal ball, because back in 2011, when the world was just beginning to think about blockchain and it was beginning to capture everybody's imagination, he had already set up his company. Now this company is one of the leading companies in software, hardware, looking at cryptocurrencies, artificial intelligence. Please let me introduce the CEO and founder of BitFury, Valery Vavilov, who's going to give his keynote, which is on a new nervous system for the digital economy. Valery, There you are. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello, hi everyone. It's a great honor to be here with all of you. I will try to be very short. A few words about myself. My name is Valery Vavilov. I am originally from Latvia. And Latvia, it's a small country with population of roughly 2 million people. It was a part of Soviet Union. Now it's part of European Union. And when I was a kid and I was 12, the Soviet Union collapsed. Yeah, and my parents literally lost everything: the pensions, the savings, the dreams. And in few years after, I thought, okay, why it's happened? And I realized what it happened because of the systems that was not designed to work for the people. And as a technologist, all my life I'm trying to find the solution how to create the system. How can we use the technology to create the systems which is really working for the people? So today we live in a world where trust is really broken. Yeah, people don't trust people. People don't trust systems. Systems don't trust systems. By Edelman Trust Barometer, you can see the data what less than 50% of all people trust the governments, the media, and so on. So the digital transformation is a good thing, but without fundamental change, it only accelerates the issue. And if you look at this world and to the people and the ownership of something, for example, let's talk about money. Yeah? We do not own really the money. Yeah? All money is owned by the bank. If bank collapsed, you lose all your money. Yeah? The identity. What is identity nowadays, today? Identity is a piece of plastic or piece of paper. If you are abroad, if you are in some country and you lose your piece of paper, which called passport, or piece of plastic, which called identity, you nobody. Yeah? Without this piece of paper, you're nobody. And of course, property rights. Yeah? Many people are losing properties just because somebody is changing records in the databases. And the decentralization is one of the global movement. It's one of the solutions, and society and businesses are trying to solve this issue by issuing decentralized systems. And we have a lot of great companies that launched during last decade, but those companies are still semi-decentralized. And so the answer was created in 2008, and the answer was the Bitcoin blockchain, which is decentralized system by design, the system which has trust inside by design. And the Bitcoin blockchain brought us to the blockchain, which as a technology will restore trust and brings control over data back to the people. And blockchain is working. Blockchain is very simple. How blockchain is working? When you put data on a blockchain, the data cannot be deleted and cannot be changed. So by solving this simple task, you can create trusted data, and you can make the systems trusted. By 2027, 10% of global GDP will be on a blockchain, and it provides incredible opportunities for trusted data processing using artificial intelligence. Because right now we're living in a world where data is growing exponentially, and somebody needs to process the data. Who will it be? And the best technology to process the data is artificial intelligence. But we also need to trust the data, and the technology what will add the trust is the blockchain. So if we look at the data today, only 2% of all data what we collected as a humanity is analyzed or processed, and 98% of the data are sitting idle and waiting until we analyze it. Only during last 2 years, we as a humanity collected 50% of the data. So it's a big trend. So the next big thing, big data and artificial intelligence and the blockchain will be, I think, the game changer for the next, I don't know, few decades. And the blockchain will be foundational for this. So artificial intelligence, as you know, will contribute by different kind of estimations, $15.7 trillion to the global economy by 2030. But we need a platform, and we need a trusted platform that will enable to use all of this power of artificial intelligence, because if you use artificial intelligence for the data that you cannot trust, you will get untrusted results. And many people are asking me, how do you explain blockchain in 2 words? And I think the answer is very simple. Blockchain is trust. Blockchain is the foundation and the technological foundation what will enable us to use this foundational technology to build the systems that we can trust, to build the systems that really works for the people. Thank you.
Your simplicity, your conciseness, your amazing PowerPoint, and that message. Thank you very, very much. Blockchain builds trust. It couldn't be simpler. Now I would like to hand over to my co-MC, Pascal, for the next keynote speech, and then there will be a panel discussion.
Now I would very much like to invite to the podium Ms. Sheila Warren from the World Economic Forum. From what I understand, she's been very busy already with TechSoup earlier, bringing together technology for the people, and now bringing together the private and the public section. And she will come to the stage. I want to invite you here. Thank you so much.
There we are. All right, thank you so much for having me. My name is Sheila Warren. I am the head of blockchain and distributed ledger technology at the World Economic Forum. And I wanted to start by laying a little bit of the foundational context in which blockchain is erupting upon the scene. Our founder, Klaus Schwab, issued this quote about 5 years ago. And the idea here is that we are at a time of tremendous technological change. Blockchain appeared on the scene at the same time as AI and machine learning was beginning to really get uptake, as IoT smart devices began to send signals through the air, as self-driving cars, autonomous mobility became something that was all the rage. And it's important to think about blockchain in this context. It does not operate in isolation, as is often perceived to be the case. It operates in connection with, and I would argue as a critical part of a technology stack that includes these other transformational technologies. As my friend Val noted, we're at a time of the erosion of public trust. Trust in institutions is at an all-time low, whether that's trust in government and government services, trust in the media, or even trust in enterprise. We're operating, in addition to a time of tremendous technological upheaval, we're also operating in a time of social and cultural upheaval. And no country in the world is exempt from these two realities. Now, I often talk about blockchain as a foundational technology, and usually when I say that, what I'm talking about is this idea that blockchain creates a foundational layer of trust in your technology stack, upon which machine learning can operate, algorithms can operate in a trusted way using trusted sources of data, or that can secure basically your IoT smart data devices, the collection, gather that in a fashion and prove a trusted source again of that kind of data. But it's also important to understand that we need to consider not just the foundations of technology, but the fact that we're in a time of eroding foundational institutional baseline. And what does that mean? Well, it means a number of things. On my journey here, I had a hopper flight from Lisbon to Malaga, and sitting next to me was a gentleman who found out that I knew something about Bitcoin and began to ask me the usual questions, as I call them. Things like, who owns Bitcoin? Can I give it to my bank? Can I hold it? Can I put it in a wallet? Can I put it in a safe? And what I think is important to understand is that this particular technology offers us this opportunity to tweak not just our processes for micro efficiencies, but to really overhaul and reconsider our foundational orthodoxy. And what we're seeing in a lot of deployments is this ability, and it's a very human thing to do, to try to wrestle with something new that's scary that we don't understand, and to try to shove it into existing models that we're familiar with or comfortable with. And what we've seen, ironically, is that this decentralized technology that is all about foundationally peer-to-peer engagement, we've taken that and captured it and tried to shove it into a traditional financial model. So we see things like custody of digital assets that resembles traditional banking. And what we're doing, as Val noted, is we're really recreating some of the paradigms that have been problematic for us in the past and that have led to the haves and the have-nots and that divide getting wider, that have led to geographic differences that have meant that there's an increasing schism in our society, that have left behind a significant proportion of the citizens of the world. And in doing so, we're walking this well-worn path, and we're expecting to see different outcomes. This technology is not going to realize its true transformational potential unless we are willing to shed, to some extent, to the extent we can, our biases, to try to resist the temptation to fall back into existing models, and to really focus on that upheaval and that transformational change and try to embrace it. Now, what does that mean? It means we can start with a concept of values. As a society, as a global society, we have certain core values that we hold dear. One of them, for example, is the idea that we should not rob the vulnerable. As this picture illustrates. We should take care to guard against fraud and corruption. We should take care and be cautious about things like know your customer, anti-money laundering, to ensure that money doesn't wind up in the wrong hands. Now, this is a slide that I often show to crypto enthusiasts. And at some point, someone will have to do a dissertation on the overlap between blockchain enthusiasm and love of winter sports, because there's a quite big connection there. But leaving that aside, what I often say with this is that regulation and policy issued by a government can often provide this landscape, this backdrop, if you will. And within that boundary, you can do whatever you want. Not dissimilar to how, when you go down a snowboarding halfpipe, you can do any trick you want, but you know there's a fundamental fairness to the context in which you're doing that, because everyone is being adjudicated in a manner that is the same. I'm not suggesting in any way that we start with a blank slate. It's not realistic. We all come with our institutional and other biases to the table. But if we try to put aside this idea that we need to be focusing on government to citizen, business to business, government to government only, and we start to imagine a world where we think of public service as enabling citizen to citizen, peer-to-peer engagement, it leads us to a different place when we think about porting those values into a new paradigm, whether that's a regulatory paradigm, a policy paradigm, or a business model paradigm. Now, context is very important, right? And a lot of deployments that we've seen, quite frankly, blockchain technology is not essential. If you're trying to feed a dog dinner, you can take a dog bowl, put some food in it, and put it on the floor. You could even decorate that dog bowl and make it really fancy. But you don't actually need to dress the dog and pose it for a picture in order to feed it dinner. And this is an analogy, I think, a good metaphor for what some blockchain technology deployments are doing. It is still the case that in many cases, for many use cases, a centralized encrypted database is going to get you where you need to be. And we should not be using blockchain for blockchain's sake. Now, happily, we've moved a bit beyond 2017, 2018, and the idea that a blockchain for everyone, a blockchain for everything, it's a silver bullet. We're not quite in a world anymore where blockchain is a hammer looking for a nail. But it is the case that we need to be responsible and think through what the actual return on investment is of this technology. So one example that's often used in public service for blockchain is elections and voting. And I use this example because I think it's very dramatic. Voting is fundamental to democracy, as we all know. And this is a kind of traditional voting scenario that many of us are familiar with. It's a kind of a Western conception of what an election or voting scenario looks like. And I think it's really important to consider that not all elections are the same. And so if we're thinking about blockchain to secure voting, the certainty or the veracity of a particular vote and log it on a blockchain, we also have to consider that this is a voting scenario. Right? This is, again, relatively familiar to many of us. Identification via thumbprint, you could imagine identification via biometric data that's held upon a blockchain that could enable this veracity. But blockchain does not solve, any technology for that matter, does not solve human problems. Humans are remarkably and historically inventive when it comes to circumventing technological safeguards, right? Because this is also an election scenario. And as we move beyond our national borders and begin to think in a global way, a truly global way about this technology, we have to build for all kinds of use cases. And we have to understand that the biases and context that we bring to a particular deployment in our jurisdiction may or may not have applicability around the world. And it is dangerous to assume that it will. To that end, the World Economic Forum is creating a blockchain Bill of Rights. This is a user-centric, citizen-centered document that we'll be launching in Davos this year in January of 2020 that focuses on fundamental human rights that we think should be captured as rights to the user and responsibilities of a deployer. And I want to talk a little bit about, I've talked about citizen-centric use, I've talked about context, so here's an example of what that actually looks like. We are in a partnership with the Inter-American Development Bank and the government of Colombia, their Inspector General's office, on a blockchain transparency project that is designed to reduce corruption in public procurement. Now, instead of just creating, apologies for my slides, instead of just creating an environment where we deployed a blockchain and we put it in from kind of a top-down manner and we saw what happened, we actually went into the town where we're going to be deploying this system and we met with the constituents who'd be affected by it. Now, in this particular case, we're looking at public procurement in a school food program. And what we're doing is we are meeting with parents and the Parent-Teacher Association and the mayor and the business community locally to really understand the problem space. And from there, from the ground up, we derived our pilot. And in connection with the technology we're deploying, we also created a citizen engagement plan. And this is an educational component that is basically focusing on what is it that citizens need to know to make sense of the data that is being captured by a blockchain. We think that this kind of education and policy is critically important in parallel with a technological deployment of a new kind of technology in order to assure that transparency, which does not automatically lead to accountability, will do so. In many cases, we are still seeing that governments and businesses are going it alone. They are jumping into the fray, they're being bold and taking risks, or they're quietly experimenting with these micro-experiments within walled gardens, but they're doing it by themselves. And our strong view at the forum is that we will go much further if we go together. We're seeing the building of various consortia in this space. We just announced a mining and metals consortia in London a few weeks ago that's going to focus on the building of a blockchain consortium in that space to examine responsible sourcing. We're seeing a little bit more cross-border trade, digital trade kinds of engagements, but we've yet to see a truly global approach that goes beyond the G7 or even the G20 and considers frontier economies as peers to those communities and countries as well. If the goal is to truly realize this technology's potential to make the world a better place, to empower citizens who've been left out of the traditional economy, we need to think globally. We need to think about connecting our citizens not just to each other, but to citizens of other countries and other nations across the world, time zones away. We need to think holistically about the context in which this technology is being deployed, and to consider it in the context of not only our own biases that we bring to bear, but also the other technologies that are interacting and intersecting with it. We need to understand that blockchain as the trusted layer of a technology stack cannot solve human problems, and that we need to enact policy that is going to support the deployment of this technology in a way that will accelerate its adoption in a beneficial way and also mitigate its risk. And that, I think, is the challenge before us. Thank you so much.
So Sheila, thank you so much for basically reminding us that it's so important not to use blockchain for blockchain's sake. And like you said, so very profoundly, hammer looking for a nail. I found that to be very interesting. Not only that, I think that we all are going to look forward to the blockchain Bill of Rights that will be there in 2020. So for our next fireside chat, I'd like to invite Julie Maupin again. We don't have to introduce Valerie, but I think, do we have 3 microphones?
Thank you very much for the remarks that you made and for giving us such a good introduction into why we're here. Also, you've been exemplary in terms of the timekeeping, and we're going to do our best to get everyone back on schedule because we know it's important to have coffee. So let's make sure that we do that. I want to start with you, Val, and just ask you to follow up a little bit on some of the points that you made in your opening talk. You talked about how blockchain makes data trustable. I wonder if you can just go into a little bit more detail. Why do we trust data that we get from the blockchain? Obviously, we have the age-old problem of garbage in, garbage out. What is it about blockchain that helps us solve that problem in a way that gives us data that we can use AI to analyze? What can we do with blockchain that we couldn't do without it in this data trust model?
It's very simple. Once you place data on a blockchain, you cannot edit it and you cannot delete it. By doing this simple operation, you eliminate any kind of manipulation with the data. Because if somebody is trying to hide something or delete something wrong, you immediately see it. And the garbage in, garbage out, it's an issue from one hand, but from other hand, if you put garbage in, you see and you realize what it's garbage after I don't know, some time, yeah? You can correct it. You put another record, but the garbage will stay. But in this case, you, let's say, you eliminate the ability to hide some bad things, yeah? You always stay the trails, yeah?
Okay, thanks. So you let the machine learn what's garbage and what's not, and you can kind of filter around that, but you eliminate the human ability to sort of manipulate data or kind of hide the ball. That's very important when we're trying to make decisions on the basis of data, obviously. What's the role, how do you see the role of privacy-focused blockchains in that? I'm just curious how you see the trust issue when you think about blockchains where you can view all the data, like in Bitcoin or Ethereum or other sort of open, public, permissionless blockchains versus ones like, let's say, Zcash or Monero, or someplace where you have privacy enhancements in order to make the data not viewable. And I mean, the context there was, if you use a blockchain, for example, for financial applications, you don't want everybody to be able to read all of your financial transactions in the same way you wouldn't want them to read your Visa or MasterCard statement, right? The entire world to have access to that. So what is the role of trust in privacy-focused versus open blockchains? How do you see that distinction?
So blockchain can be open, blockchain can be closed, blockchain can be private, blockchain can be public, yeah. The fundamental value of blockchain is the trust of the data. Once you place data on a blockchain, you can trust it. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You can. The question of privacy will not be solved by the blockchain. Yeah, by the blockchain we are solving the issue of the trust. And when you design the system, you design to open this data or to close this data. But at least you can trust the data, and that's the fundamental value of the blockchain. Okay, Sheila, you were talking about how a couple of years ago there was sort of a mentality of there's a blockchain for that, in the same way that there's an app for that, which is not helpful because often you're applying the wrong solution to a problem. How can we tell whether distributed ledger technologies can actually help? What are the evaluation criteria to solve a problem? And where using a distributed ledger technology would actually be unnecessary, possibly more expensive, possibly even harmful to the cause that you're trying to achieve? How do you look at that?
Well, I'll point people, first of all, to two resources the forum has issued. One is a paper we wrote called Blockchain Beyond the Hype, which came out in April 2018, but is remarkably robust and actually still applies today. And that focuses on questions like, is there a trust issue fundamentally? Do you have a need for a central authority? It may be that you actually want to have a custodian of certain kinds of data and that authority or that blessing given by that particular entity is quite critical. They can serve as a traffic cop, for example, or other purposes. If you're not looking for a distributed or decentralized solution, then this may not be it may not be fit for purpose. So that's one core issue. Is there a question about the need to eliminate intermediaries is another one, slightly different. And so there's kind of a decision tree that we have created that walks you through some of the core questions you would want to assess to decide fitness for purpose of this technology. Now, a separate question, I think, is the ROI. And to some extent, that's going to be about evaluating your legacy system, to some extent. It may be that you're reaching a point of technical obsolescence and you already need to update your systems, in which case a complete conversion to a blockchain-backed system may make sense. It may be that your legacy system simply is new. Maybe you put it in place 3 years ago, and so the ROI, there's a different kind of accounting you're going to do on that question, and it's quite a custom question to each particular instance. We also published a paper that really is about, is blockchain worth the investment? I think it's actually called, is blockchain worth the investment, as I recall. And that one walks through some of these kinds of use cases and gives you almost a toolkit, a checklist for this kind of evaluation to assess where, when, and whether a blockchain might serve as part of a technology solution for the problem that you have.
And Val, you founded one of the first sort of major projects in the space in 2014, was it, that you founded Bitfury?
2011.
2011, that's even much earlier. And you have had tremendous success growing and being involved in all kinds of different projects that, initially working exclusively with sort of Bitcoin-based blockchain technology and evolving beyond that. How do you and your company think about this problem? When someone comes to you and says, hey, we'd like to do a project, we got earmarked a budget of this to do this. Do you look at them and say, you don't need a blockchain for that? How do you walk them through a process of, yes, this is something where we can really add value, and no, we think that you should just go use a networked database or whatever?
Of course, you can use any database. Yeah, the question is, do you want 100% to trust the data, or you don't want 100% to trust the data? It's very simple. Yeah, why put the last slide, the blockchain equal trust? Yeah, because it's as simple as this. Yeah, but blockchain is not the cure for all the illnesses. Blockchain will not solve, I don't know, cancer. Blockchain will not solve.
Not yet.
Will not get people to the Mars, yeah, or to Venus, yeah. but blockchain will allow you to create the foundation to start building the trusted systems. Because right now, the foundation is wrong. Yeah? We started to build systems, but we end up with untrusted systems. Yeah, we can trust, for example, in some countries our systems are working fine, but in some countries it's totally broken. Yeah, but blockchain, the beauty of the blockchain is what this technology will allow you to create systems without any human interaction. So basically, the technology will control the trust, which is a very good thing.
Mm-hmm. And I think one thing you might be getting at, Julie, is also this question of how permanent do you need the record to be? And so one of the questions that we often ask is, do you care if this is kind of ephemeral data and you're keeping it for a short period of time, but it doesn't matter if it has any permanence to it whatsoever? Maybe you don't need to secure it on a blockchain, right? I mean, maybe it doesn't matter. I remember early on in 2018 when everybody was calling, like every 5 seconds there was a consultation on this topic, and in sort of a peak week, weary moment, I kind of said to a CEO of a big company, like, are you sure you don't just want to use, Slack or chat for that? Do you really need to put this on a blockchain? And I think that was more of a legitimate question back then, and we were getting this hammer nail problem than it is now, but it is a fundamental question as well.
Yeah, so Val, you mentioned that you're not going to solve cancer with the blockchain. And Sheila, you were talking about how there's a need to put together an end-to-end plan. Community engagement, upstream, downstream, all the different actors and stakeholders, policymakers, and people who need to be involved in tackling particular problems, like the example that you gave in Colombia. Was it Colombia? Yeah. Can you give an example, Val, maybe you can give an example of a project that you've worked on, where you had your piece, and you did your piece well, but needed to also work together with others before and after you in the chain to help contribute to a problem, or to solve the problem. And then I'd like to understand a little bit more about how you go about putting together the coalition of people who need to make up that end-to-end chain.
We're working on many projects right now to implement blockchain system. One of the first projects that we implemented in government, for example, services, was in Republic of Georgia. We put land title registration on a blockchain. Very good examples of another project is the diplomas. For example, I was very surprised when we started to analyze this space, the university diplomas. Yeah, more than 20% of all university diplomas are fake. Are falsified, yeah, from top universities. It was a big surprise. So we put diplomas on the blockchain, collaborative with one of university. I think we will extend this project further. And yeah.
Okay, so by putting the diplomas on the blockchain, you can attest and weed out that 20% that are fake, essentially. If everyone knows they have to go to the blockchain to look for the real ones. And then you also have the problem of getting the students and the employers and everybody who wants to check it to use this new tool, right, Sheila? And that's where your sort of end-to-end description comes in. How would you go about that?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think I have a background in civic technology, so thinking through civil society use cases and technology, and a lot of the many more than not, vast majority of deployments of technology in that space are failed deployments because there is no constituent feedback loop and you're not getting any real-time understanding from end users about what actually is going to work. A classic example of this is something called the play pump, which is a sort of a legend in the philanthropic space. And basically this was a situation where an attempt to build a new source of water for a community, some people went in and they put a pump that had a merry-go-round on it, right, in a community. And the idea was that children would play on this merry-go-round and it would pump water for the community. And of course what happened was it was put in this location that made no sense. It was off the path of the entire community, and a lot of the social networks of the community were disrupted because it turns out a lot of the adults in the community would walk to water together, and that's how they actually organized to create political change and social change, et cetera. And by disrupting that kind of environment and that ability to engage with each other in that peer-to-peer way through these merry-go-rounds, the whole society began to fracture. And so this is a failed experiment. So one of the learnings from this kind of example is that you have to always be putting the user first. Now this is not a new or unknown kind of question in product build. Like anybody who's building a solid product will tell you you need to constantly consult the users. But when it comes to government services, because governments are by and large elected by the people, there's this kind of default assumption that they represent the people's actual need. And that is often not the case with technology. So our approach is very laborious. It is certainly extraordinarily inefficient, but we go repeatedly into actual communities to understand what the need really is before we even deign to imagine what a design would look like, what a product design or build would look like. And I think that's just a really important component of any effective solution building.
Okay, thanks. So I'd like to ask both of you, and then we'll start taking a couple of the questions from the audience from Slido. I'd like to ask both of you, you mentioned policy frameworks and how governments can help to adopt policies that promote innovation and also provide some guidelines for how to go about things in a compliant way. What's an example? How can governments encourage peer-to-peer innovation and the furtherance of distributed ledger technologies without this deep anxiety that they're going to lose control over everything, and that things are going to go wild and crazy things are going to be happening, and DAOs are going to pop up all over the place and explode, and lots of people will lose money. How do they go about that? How should they think about promoting peer-to-peer innovation and distributed technologies, while also being able to sleep at night that, hey, I'm doing my job as a policymaker, and I know that when I wake up tomorrow, there's a fairly low chance that the economy will have exploded.
What we see, and we are operating all around the world in 20 countries right now, we see the biggest issue right now is the lack of education. Yeah, and I think government first of all need to involve technologists to help them to educate people, for example, yeah, and to solve all those issues together. Yeah, because education is the key. World is growing so fast. We cannot catch up right now. It's exponential growth. And the policymakers and governments need to become more, I think, agile, yeah, more startup-ish, yeah, and start creating policies, new policies, smart policies for the smart innovation, for the smart world. Because in many areas, we are moving as a technologists so fast, and governments, for example, trying to apply it, the 100-year-old regulations for something, but maybe you don't need to regulate. And blockchain, I think, also will enable so-called smart regulation, because once you enable trust to any system, why to regulate? You just trust it. You remove all these middlemen, and I think this could help. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what the technology can do and can't do. And again, we're trying to apply these existing models and shove this new technology into it, or kind of find a way to accommodate it. Now, I'm a lawyer by training, so I am hardly against rules or regulation or policy or law. I mean, I love it. Everyone wants a bright line, kind of standard, but that's not really how this works. And I think that there is a need for more agile governance models. It's something the forum is also working on extensively, is thinking through what does that look like. Maybe it involves automatic sunset periods or reconsideration. Maybe it involves a sandbox where you're actually working together with the startup or business community to make sure that you're accommodating their innovation and the direction that they're going. And you're not inadvertently chilling the innovation that you want to spur in your economy, let alone globally. So I do think all of that is really critically important. But I also think it comes back to this value-centered governance. And if you're really grounding everything in these fundamental values, this is why we are crafting this blockchain Bill of Rights, but just fundamental core values that are the nature and the basis for public policy to begin with, I think that that is a good starting place.
Yeah, thanks. And I would add also that it seems like governments are starting to, and government entities, starting to try and get out there and talk to the technologists more than in the past. In my interview before, I mentioned the example of how the GDPR was drafted without any knowledge that blockchain was out there developing, essentially. And And we have seen, recently moves from the technology side. I'm sure you've seen this as well, Val, that we're getting much more proactively approached from policymakers and regulators. The European Central Bank, for example, recently did a roadshow where they went to all the major innovation hubs around Europe and tried to meet with as many startups as they could that were working in the payment space, because they wanted to understand, how does it work and how is this going to affect our policy making, etc. And I'd never seen that kind of initiative before, of them going on a roadshow rather than expecting, the small little startups to come to Brussels. So I think that's a positive development. And again, something that INAPA will help with as well, bringing people together so that they don't have to be traveling all around to every single innovation hub and meeting with every startup. Let's take a question from the audience. So the most popular question that was voted so far is about quantum. The audience wants to know what is the transition from blockchain networks currently to quantum connectivity going to look like? What are the challenges? How do you chart that course? Val, do you want to go first?
I don't see really big challenges. Yeah, of course there is a big threat that quantum computer will make all our encryption systems obsolete. Yeah, but if you look, we analyzed also quantum computing back in 2012 with the question, okay, quantum computer will let's say, decrypt all encrypted systems, but can it decrypt the Bitcoin blockchain? And we end up with the conclusion, but no, quantum computer will not be able to hack or decrypt the Bitcoin blockchain because of the design of the Bitcoin blockchain. So I think quantum computer is a good thing because it will help us to analyze data even faster than we are doing now. Yes, it will eliminate some legacy systems, but the new systems like cryptocurrency, I think, will be resistant to quantum computer. And it's natural, let's say, evolution of humanity. We invent something new.
Can I ask for the next question to be queued up while we're...
It's coming up.
Okay.
On the back, and otherwise I'd be happy to ask, because one of the questions that has been voted most is how do you ensure trust in a private blockchain where data could become changed by an owner? So there is a concern or a question that I think is very valid, has been voted most.
Great, thank you, and I think we have it now on the screen.
Okay, great.
Yeah, this is a good question, and the answer is simple. It's a Bitcoin blockchain, yeah? And how we do it, and we implemented this system in Republic of Georgia when we put land title on the blockchain. We created two-layer structure. First layer was the private blockchain, which is very limited and owned by government. But second layer is the Bitcoin blockchain. So basically, we are taking the snapshot of the private blockchain and putting this snapshot hash code to the Bitcoin blockchain every 10 minutes or every hour, whatever. By this, we are creating a real-time audit of this private blockchain system data consistency. And you can change the private blockchain. Potentially, it's very hard to do, but potentially you can do it. But you cannot change Bitcoin blockchain. And we're using Bitcoin blockchain as this security layer of trust.
So the idea is that you're creating essentially a tech stack with layers of trust that kind of differ. So you have a private blockchain sitting on top of what remains the most trusted blockchain, if you will, which is the Bitcoin blockchain. It's a common fallacy that all data is held on-chain. There's on-chain and off-chain, right? And in a lot of systems, what's actually happening is a lot of the data is being held off-chain and the transaction record is being held on-chain. So there's a distinction to be made there as well. This is how some companies, for example, are dealing with GDPR, because the PII is being held off-chain so that it can be, right to be forgotten and all that kind of thing.
Personally identifiable information.
Yeah, exactly. PII, personal information. So I always assume it's all Europeans. So that can be deleted as needed or as required by GDPR, but the transaction record is held on-chain, and then you can secure everything with the Bitcoin blockchain underneath, or kind of like pointing to the Bitcoin blockchain.
Yeah, and just in the interests of recognizing the wide array of backgrounds of the audience, this can be done with any public permissionless ledger.
Yes,
not
that's
just
right.
It can be done with Ethereum or with any other IOTA, any other public permissionless blockchain.
Yeah, you can do it. The only difference is so far the Bitcoin blockchain is the most secured blockchain. That's the only difference. And you should not, when we are speaking about Bitcoin blockchain, you should not think about it as a cryptocurrency. You should think about it as a technology, what will help you to secure any other blockchains as well.
Okay. Can we have the next question from the audience on the Slido, please?
The questions are over, so.
Oh, okay. All right, then we will.
No, that's not a problem.
All right.
Anyway.
Sorry, I thought we were going to be getting more questions coming up. Then I will continue with questions of my own. Can you think of an example of something proactive that a public entity has done that has helped make it easier for innovators in the DLT space?
Creation of an ADBA organization. This is helpful.
I agree. I was going to say that as well. I also think regulatory sandboxes have been helpful. And so the ability of a regulator to actually accommodate some of the innovation that startups in particular are engaging in and real-time do assessments in conjunction and cooperatively with that community is actually quite helpful as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. We have time for one more question quickly. What will success look like 5 years from now, looking back? If you're successful and you're successful, what will it mean for the distributed ledger technology to have been successful 5 years from now? What would you like to look back and say, yes, we achieved that?
I mean, I think that people will, honestly, they will stop talking about the blockchain. It'll become almost this obvious, invisible kind of layer that is deployed regularly without much eyebrow raising. You know, I think it'll become kind of commonplace that we've substituted our current trust mechanisms for the blockchain. And that, in my mind, when some of the fear and the uncertainty and the questions around this go away, I think that's when we'll have achieved success.
I think the success will be when everyone will start to collaborate to implementing the new technologies, not only the blockchain technology, but also artificial intelligence. And if we are looking at this world right now, we are competing. And from one hand, competition is very good. Yeah, competition is lead to the progress. But from another thing, competition is the best from the worst, what we learn how to do. Yeah, and once we switch from competition to collaboration, I think this could be a huge success for the whole humanity, not only on blockchain, but on other levels as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll move to the coffee break now, I believe.
Yes, thank you so much for this enlightening panel. I would encourage everybody very much to discuss what does trust look like. I think when we look back at this panel where it's important to look at the end-to-end solutions for blockchain, I want to invite you at 11:15 in Auditorium 2 and at 11:15 at the corner as well. There will be the next keynotes and panel discussions. We start here back again at 11:30. So I welcome you all back here, or my colleagues Claire in Auditorium 2 and Louis at the corner. Thank you so much.